What's going on, everyone? It's Alex Ramosi here, founder and CEO of Acquisition.com. We own a portfolio of companies, and we work with companies that are between, at minimum, $3 to $10 million a year in revenue, and we help them scale and exit in 3 to 5 years so that they never have to make another dollar again. You should only have to get rich once. So that's our saying. For everyone else who's below $3 million or $10 million in revenue, then I am making all of these trainings for free to hopefully get you to that point so that we can potentially work together. And at the very least, if you're not there, then just enjoy it for free. I just want everyone to be wealthy, and I mean that genuinely. And so the second component, so this is the second component of creating offers that will convert and make you money. All right. And so this is what helped us, do 120, I think at this point, million in sales across lots of entities that we have. And so it's charging what it's worth. And so my last video talked about finding a starving crowd, which you can find at acquisition.com. But this one is, and that's under the offers training. This is obviously offer number 2, charging what it's worth. All right. So the offer might not be converting first because you might be in the wrong market, but it might also not be converting if you're in the right market because you might be the wrong price. All right. So this is a really important component of making something make money, right? If you charge nothing for something, then you probably won't make money from it. All right. And so here's how to pick the right price. Okay. So there's a few components to this. One is going to be the price to value discrepancy. So it's understanding how that even works altogether. The next is going to be the virtuous cycle of pricing, which is one of my favorite concepts to break down for people because it was a huge belief breaker for me in my life. And then understanding the correlation between pricing and perceived value. All right. So let's start with the price to value discrepancy. Okay. So I have this little graph here. And the reason that this is so important to understand is that whenever you have services or products or anything whatsoever, people inherently buy because they believe that what they are getting in value is superior to price, right? This is how people make purchasing decisions, right? And the thing is they will continue to buy from you as long as this discrepancy between price and value exists, right? Here's the price, here's the value, all right? And so as long as value stays above the price, then they're happy, right? Now, here's the thing, and this is where you stop getting customers or people, bought from you once and they don't want to buy from you again, is the moment that value dips below or matches your price, then that is the point of cancellation or the point of no return. So if you're in a recurring revenue business, it would be a point of cancellation. If you're selling physical products or one-time services, then they're not going to refer people and they're not going to want to do business with you again, right? And the thing is that most businesses, believe it or not, are actually below this line. And so they're really only able to make one sale per customer and they can never make another sale again, which massively impacts the business. That's why most businesses don't make money. They always have to find new customers because their existing product isn't that good. And I'm going to be really honest with you for a second. So many times I talk to business owners and they're like, we're so good at what we do, we just can't find customers. The reality is that you probably aren't that good. You're probably mediocre. You're probably average. And the thing is that average puts you here or below. And in order to get repeat business, you can't just be like above average. You need to be exceptional. You need to be remarkable. You need to be so good that people talk about you. And that's difficult to do. And that's why most people don't make money. And that's okay. And that's why you're here and you're learning and getting better. All right. So price to value discrepancy. Understanding this concept in terms of how much value you need to provide is going to be key to making sure that our pricing works. So there's 2 ways to improve this discrepancy. One is you can lower your price, right? Which is a one-way ticket to failure. The other way is to increase your value. All right, which is always the way that when I'm working with a business is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out ways to increase the value and more importantly, the perceived value of the product or services to the customers and prospects so that they're more willing to pay a higher rate. And so part of that's going to be niching down, part of that's going to be positioning the offer and reversing risk and all that kind of stuff, which we're going to get to in some of the future videos. All right. And so, like I said, number 1 is you can lower the price. Number 2 is you can raise the value, which is obviously the one that we want to go to. All right. So let's go into that. All right. So that's the hard way and the easy way is to raise the value. All right. But remember, you can only go down to 0, but you can go infinitely high the other direction for value, which is one of the key points. And this was one I remember I was eating a burger when I was a kid, when I was working at a smoothie shop. And one of the coworkers that I had pulled me aside. He's like, dude, check this out. And he was reading a magazine because when magazines existed. And he was like, look, this guy bought a $50,000 burger. And I was walking in with my burger from next door that I bought for $13, right? And he's like, he paid $50,000 for a burger. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, how could somebody afford $50,000 for a burger? That's crazy. And so I asked him, I was like, what does this guy do? He's like, apparently he's some hedge fund guy, some finance guy. And he made, I can't remember the number was, but I think he made like 20 or $30 million in a year, which they said in the article. And the reason that this was so interesting to me was that I realized that you could go infinitely high in the other direction, but you could only go down to 0. Because for me at the time, believe it or not, me buying a $13 burger on a $6.75 hour wage was me giving 2 hours of my life in order to get that amount of money. For him, at $20 million a year, he was making, whatever it was, 25,000 an hour, whatever the math is, right? Or he might have made 50. It doesn't matter. I remember he was making 25,000 an hour. And so it took him 2 hours of time to pay for this $50,000 burger, and it took me 2 hours of time to pay for my $13 burger. And so that's when I realized that purchase was actually equivalent for both of us. And so that's what showed me the power of pricing, is that, my God, there are some people who could go infinitely high in the other direction, but I can only go down to zero, right? And so that was a huge belief-breaking moment for me in understanding price to value discrepancy, all right? And the goal is that they buy a tremendous amount of value at a discount. That is always the goal, is that you're selling dollars at a discount, all right? Dollars at a discount. That's the idea, is they have to feel like their dollars are going to be the best return on their, quote, investment of spending. Their money that they've hard earned is going to be with you because they get so much more per dollar. Not how many dollars they spend, but per dollar, they're going to get more than anywhere else, all right? So price to value discrepancy, the goal is to increase the value. That's why that's so important. All right. So number 2 is the virtuous cycle of price. So this is what most people do when they're trying to decide on pricing for their business. They look at the marketplace, they see what everyone else is offering, they take the average, they go slightly below to, quote, remain competitive. They provide whatever their competition offers with, quote, a little more, and end up at a value proposition of more for less. This is what you don't want to do. This is what everyone does. This is why everyone's broke. So stop looking at them. Every one of these competitors that you're looking at is poor. So that's the big secret. I can tell you, having spoken with so many business owners who look a certain way, who present a certain way, most people are broke. All right. So don't model them. Don't copy them. Do something different. Do it on your own. Use your own brain. All right. So this is what I consider the vicious cycle of price. All right. Because as you do this, all you have to do over time is you repeat step 5 and 6. You try and provide a little bit more for a little bit less, a little bit more for a little bit less, until eventually you're giving everything for nothing and you can't make money and you wonder why you aren't successful. All right. The point here is that when you price this way, you're pricing for market efficiency. All right, this is what they talk about in perfect marketplaces in economics, is the pricing for people who are not sophisticated competitors. They will continue to do this same process, like I just said, is try to do a little bit more for a little bit less over and over and over again, until eventually there's almost no profit left in the business. All right, and so that green is your profit, the red is the overhead, because you've been forced into this category of everyone, which forces you to compete on price, which drives you down, which means pretty much everyone just goes out of business or stays just barely above water every month, just barely keeping themselves above water and wondering when that corner that's going to come is going to, and it never does, because they can't do it better. They have to do it differently. So this is what the virtuous cycle of price looks like. All right. So vicious cycle. So for your clients, if you decrease the price, you decrease their emotional investment, you decrease the perceived value of your product, you decrease their results, because you decrease the price because they're not as invested. You increase the demandingness of these clients. I'll tell you, the people who pay you the least are the ones who are the biggest pain in the butt. And the revenue for fulfillment per customer goes down. So this is the dangerous side of the price. Now, the virtuous side is if you increase your price, you increase their emotional investment, you increase their perceived value of what you do. By extension, you increase the results. You decrease the demandingness of the people that you have, and you increase the revenue for fulfillment per customer. What I mean by that is that because they pay you more, you can literally spend more money to give them an exceptional experience and make sure they get the results they want, which increase their perceived value. And that is why this is a virtuous cycle. This is a circle. I probably should draw it as a circle next time. I will do that. But it's a circle that self-fulfills, and it's a flywheel, right? That's the beauty of virtuous pricing. Vicious is flywheel the wrong direction that's working against you, all right? But let me show you what this looks like for your business, right? So for your business, if you decrease your price, you decrease your profit, you decrease your perceived value of self. You're like, man, I'm just a low-cost person. I'm not good. I don't believe in myself. That's why I have to lower my price. You decrease your perception of impact because you're not getting these people results. So then you start to question your own validity, and your conviction starts to drop. You don't feel as confident in your ability to provide services and value because you continue to have to decrease your price. And you're almost feeling like you're trying to give away your services in order to be successful. So people don't want to buy them from you because you're not convicted, because you on some level already know that you can't provide the level of service because you don't have any margin left over, right? Which goes to the next one, which is the service levels, right? Your level of service decreases because you just have less money. You can't pay people, you can't attract better talent. And so it's a vicious cycle downwards. And your sales team in and of itself, and that might be you or might be your team, they start to lose conviction in you and your services because of all the things that I just said, right? Now, let's put on the flip side. If you can increase your price, right, you'll increase your profitability, right? You'll increase your perceived value of self. You're like, hey, we're a premium leader. We are the best at this, which is a category of 1. Your perception of impact will increase. You feel like your clients are getting better results from working with you. Your service levels will increase because you have excess money left over to reinvest in talent, reinvest in providing exceptional experience. And your sales team or you are massively convicted because you know you're changing people's lives and making the impact that you always wanted to, which is why you started the business to begin with. And you may have made some of these mistakes up to this point, but that's okay because you can always change, because that's the beauty of being our own bosses. We can always make the decisions. All right. So that is the virtuous cycle of price, and hopefully what I'm selling you right now on increasing pricing. But I'm going to give you one more real one of showing you why you should charge what it's worth. All right. And it's that price in and of itself is a communication of value. Think about it. I'm going to give you a little example here. So this was a taste test. I'll cite the study somewhere. But for right now, this was a blind taste test that was done on 3 wines, okay? And so they presented the tasters with a low-priced wine, a medium-priced wine, and an expensive wine, all right? So they could see the price on the bottles right in front of them. They tasted them, and they asked people to rate them in, good, better, best, right? And so they said the low-priced one, unsurprisingly, was not as good. They said the medium one was medium, and they said the higher-priced one was great, all right? Fairly standard, and a lot of us kind of come to that association. Good wines are more expensive, and that's why they're good. That's why they're more expensive, right? But here's what's interesting. All of those wines were actually the exact same wine, just put in different bottles with different price tags on them. And so here's why this is so important. People literally perceived more value from the same product because the price was higher. So that means that you don't just charge higher prices because your product is better. Charging higher prices also makes your product better. Think about that for a second. Now, if you are the wine business owner of this particular bottle, and you had a way of doing one thing that made you more money and increased the perception of your clients believing that what you had was better, would you do it? Of course, right? Why would you not get the better result for your client, right? Why would you want to sell the bad wine when you could sell the great wine, right? And it's the same exact wine. Why would you not do that? Of course you would. You didn't do it because you probably were afraid of what would happen. But I'm telling you, having done this with so many businesses, if you can increase the price, you'll increase the perception of value and people will like it more. Warren Buffett, he took over See's Candies, 30, 40 years ago, whatever it was. And he's since made $1 billion from this purchase that he bought for $24 million. All right. $1 billion in net free cash flow. That's money that he took out of the business after reinvesting. And every single year, what they've done is they've raised the prices at a higher rate than inflation. And so they've raised it by 5-6%. Every single year they raised the price. And they found out that chocolates were actually fairly inelastic, as in people would be willing to pay $40, $50, $60 for a box of chocolates, right? And when they started with them, they were, not even close to that. But by doing this, they raised their profit, they raised the perceived quality of their product, and they did all of that simply by changing a number. How awesome is that? That's the beauty of the virtuous cycle of price. All right. So the goal is to be so much more expensive that a consumer must pause and think, this cannot be the same category of solution as everyone else's, thereby making you a category of 1. This is how I always like to think about it. If you can make your price so much disconnected from the marketplace, not just a little bit more expensive, but significantly more expensive than the rest of the marketplace, then they have to pause. So when I started Gym Launch, which was my first company, when I came into the marketplace, the most expensive competitor was priced at $5,000. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to just be a little bit more expensive. I want to be way more expensive. And so our product, the minimum thing that someone could buy from us was $16,000. And the next thing someone could buy from us was $126,000, right? It was so far outside of what everyone else was doing that they were like, my God, like this has to be something different. It must be something different because it's priced so differently. And so your price communicates so much about your business and the value you're going to provide that it's inextricably linked to the value that you're providing, all right? Which is why in one of our ways of fixing the value is actually looking at the price and making sure that we're charging what it's worth so that we can provide the results in a meaningful way to our prospects. Because obviously all that extra money that I was able to have compared to my competitors, they had $5,000 and had to make a margin from that. I had $16,000. I could reinvest $5,000 right off the top into making unbelievable experience. I could invest the entire cost of their program into making someone's experience better. And as a result, our clients got better results. Their perceived value was higher. We had more referrals, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the virtuous cycle in action. Okay. And so note, if you have something where a client must perform options or some action, in order to be successful, then it would follow the more invested they are, the more invested they will be. All right, which in turn will create better students and better outcomes. So ethically, If you want to say that you're helping someone the most you possibly can, then you have to ethically get them emotionally invested in the outcome, especially if you're doing a do-it-yourself or done with you type of service where they have to do something. You have to increase their emotional investment in order for them to get the result. All right. And so increasing the quality of your prospects increases the quality of your product. Think about that for a second. You can literally increase the quality of your product because the level and the number of customers who are successful by increasing the quality of your prospects, which you can do by raising your price, which is a barrier to entry for people to come in. And so that way you get only the best people, you have more money to invest in them, and then they have a higher perceived value. They don't price compare you to anyone else because you're so far outside of their range, and you can do things that no one else can do because you have more margin than everyone else has. And that's how you create a winning combo. All right. And so that includes how to charge what it's worth. And so in the next video, which you can find at acquisition.com, this is in the offers training. I have all of these courses and modules for you there. They're absolutely free. My goal is for anyone who's below $3 million a year to just use my stuff and make the money. Like, absolutely take it, go make your $3 million plus. And hopefully, once you cross 3 or 5 million, give us a call and we'd love to help you get to 30 plus and exit so you only have to get rich once. So keep being awesome. We'll see you on the flip side. Bye.